Hello and welcome. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the quality of the Rose accessories, that's their bags and shoes for men and women. I'm Anesu Sagonda and I produce educational luxury content for anyone after the finer things, whether you're new to money and wanting to learn how to navigate the terrain, or you're young and starting out in life and wanting to reap the benefits of buying a better quality from the get-go. Or you're into luxury, but you want to focus more on high quality, under the radar brands, then my content is geared towards you. I'm going to include timestamps in this video, as I always do, for anybody who would like to jump past this first bit and go straight through to my thoughts on the quality of their accessories. But I'd like to start by talking about the Row and why I think it's such a powerful brand within the luxury space. It's a brand that occupies an incredibly unique and significant position. It's unique in that it's a brand that was started by two sisters. I think they are twins, Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen, and they are actors first and foremost. They don't have a background in fashion, but what they do have is access to fairly deep pockets of money, coupled with absolutely fantastic advisors who've been able to build an absolutely phenomenal luxury brand in record time. And they've built a brand that's become fairly significant within the luxury space. It's the foremost, the front running brand when it comes to the quiet luxury movement. And last year, I remember reading articles about their front running bag, the Margot, being pitted against the Birkin from Hermes, the most coveted handbag within the luxury space. And it was pitted against the Birkin, not because of the exceptional craftsmanship or quality of the leathers, but because of the hype, the allure, the appeal behind the Margot and also the brand. A couple of years ago, I remember one of my viewers posting a comment against a video where I was talking about totes that are better options to the Saint Louis from Goya or the Neverfull from Louis Vuitton. And I remember the viewer referred to Goya as a communication accessory. And I really liked that phrase. I thought, oh gosh, I really like it. I've never heard it before. And I'm going to use it. I asked for permission to steal the phrase. Last year, I remember thinking, the Row truly is the ultimate communication accessory. A communication accessory is a brand that consumers buy from, not because of the high quality of the materials used or the exceptional craftsmanship that's gone into the making of the products, but they buy the products because of the look. They buy into the brand because of the look, because of the hype, the appeal, what it says about them. The typical Row consumer is somebody who's cool, chic, fashion forward, someone who's trendy, someone who may even be aspirational, a celebrity. Think, for example, Kendall Jenner. She's heavily associated with the brand. She often rocks their bags and their clothes, for example, and she has millions of subscribers on social media, hanging on to her last word and whatever her recommendations are. Or it may be someone who has access to quite a bit of cash. They have additional disposable income. They are wealthy. They possibly have access to a top-rated stylist who's able to get them access to the Row products, which are typically hard to find, waitlisted. The Margot, it sells before it even hits the shop floor. The Row is a communication accessory. You buy into their products because of the look and not because of the craftsmanship or the high quality of the materials that have gone into their products. And I've spent extensive time really looking at their apparel, their accessories in a lot of detail and trying to just understand the brand, the products, what's gone into them and so forth. And if you look at anything, consider anything from the Row with the look in mind, as opposed to you are buying something that's going to be exceptionally well made, then it'll serve you well. So the Row is very much a communication accessory. look at the brand, buy into the brand, knowing it's about the look, it's about the hype, and not about exceptional quality materials or craftsmanship. I'm going to kick off with shoes, and I'm going to talk about men's and women's shoes interchangeably. And then I will finish with handbags. And I'll also talk about male and female bags interchangeably. The Row have 3 concessions in London, one in Selfridges, the other one in Harrods, and the third in Harvey Nichols. And they also have a standalone store that's located just off Mount Street on Carlos Place. I went to the Harvey Nichols concession. They had a fairly diverse selection of women's shoes. In Harrods, I saw 4-5 pairs of men's shoes, men's bags. I didn't see women's shoes. I didn't go up to shoe heaven. But in their standalone store, I was able to see a fairly sizable selection of women's shoes, bags, and about 6 or 7 pairs of men's shoes and a couple of bags. What's worth noting before I talk about the quality is men's shoes are generally better made than women's shoes. And that's because men generally buy fewer pairs of shoes, especially in comparison to women. Men will typically buy a fairly small considered selection, and they'll tend to buy the very best they can afford. And so men's footwear brands tend to focus more on a higher level of craft and detail and better quality leathers when it comes to men's shoes, because men, as I've mentioned, will buy the very best they can afford and sometimes buy a pair of shoes they wear their entire life or a handful, and that's it. Whereas women tend to buy considerably more pairs of shoes generally. Shoes for different occasions, for an outfit, for an event, for a bit of a booster. They're in a bad mood, they're feeling low, they go out shopping, they buy a pair of shoes. And what you will generally find is that brands focused on women's footwear do not put the same level of high craft and detail and leathers into women's shoes, because women, as I mentioned, will typically buy more and they have a significantly higher turnover generally. And that is also reflected in the number of pairs of shoes. So for example, in Harrods, I saw 4 pairs of shoes. In their standalone store, about 7 or 8 pairs of shoes. Whereas in Harvey Nichols and in their standalone store, I saw well over 20 pairs of shoes in Harvey Nichols. In their standalone, 30 pairs of shoes plus different styles. And some of the styles weren't even out on the shop floor. I actually had to request certain styles, and then they brought them out from their stockroom, for example. So generally speaking, men's shoes are better made than women's shoes, and that is also reflected in the quality, the craftsmanship, and the quantity of men's shoes versus women's shoes in terms of the styles. The shoes, I'm going to split them into 3 categories. Delicate shoes, shoes that can't be repaired, and then the third, shoes that can be repaired. The first category, delicate, tended to be women's shoes. I remember walking into Harvey Nichols and seeing their flats and just being totally stunned because they looked really cheap. They were expensive, about 870, 890 pounds, and they were more the entry level. They looked cheap. The leather was soft. It was buttery soft. It felt fantastic. But the look, the aesthetic, it just looked cheap. And they're the type of shoes that didn't look out of place in a market, whether it's Brixton or Seven Sisters in London, Mbare Msika in Harare, or in New York, in Queens, or downtown LA or Compton, for example. They looked cheap, but they were expensive. And the interior, the suede looked man-made. The shearling, although soft, it just looked cheap. The shoes didn't look the part, but they were incredibly expensive. And to add insult to injury, they were incredibly flimsy. They offered 0 level of comfort or support. The sole incredibly thin, and you actually felt like you're walking on the ground. There wasn't any real protection. You could feel everything you were stepping on. And the soles, the shoes were actually glued, and the soles could not be repaired. So once the sole had worn through, as thin as it is, it couldn't be removed and repaired. And I remember speaking to a couple of cobblers to ask their thoughts on repairs and whether something was worth investing in. And I remember the first cobbler, a cobbler I've spoken about before, Classic Shoe Repairs. I'm going to include their details in the description box down below. I cannot recommend Classic Shoe Repairs highly enough. They are responsible for the majority of designer shoe repairs in the United Kingdom. And if you're traveling from overseas and you have a pair of shoes, you would like someone who pays a lot of attention to the details and someone who will be honest and tell you the truth about whether they can really repair it and manage your expectations, I cannot recommend Classic Shoes highly enough. I take my shoes to them. I only take my shoes to them unless I return them to the designer brand. There's certain brands that take their own shoes, but Classic Shoe Repairs is fantastic. And also went to a slightly lower grade, lower tier shoe repair called Timpson's. They're more everyday shoes. And they both said with the flats, the really flimsy flats, they didn't have the glue that would be able to, if you were to place a grip, which is what I typically do with flats, placed on the base to prolong the life of the sole, you can't do that with the flats. The glue doesn't stick to the grip. You literally wear them through. They are occasion shoes, the type of shoes you'd wear to an event. You arrive in a taxi, you leave in a taxi, and you cannot pound the streets because you will ruin the shoes very quickly. You will wear them through, and the sole is so thin. If you were to be caught in the rain, the shoes would be ruined. And they really are occasion shoes and to be used absolutely sparingly. But I did notice a slightly higher category of flats with a little sole. You can add the grip to those. You can also change heel, for example. Slightly more support, better quality leather, a leather that's a little more durable, a little more robust. But again, they're not shoes for life. They have a shelf life, and depending on how often you wear them, you need to be fairly sparing and delicate with them. And then moving over to the shoes you can't repair. They are also glued shoes, and they typically will have a sole that's unique to the row. Some did have soles where you could add the grip, the glue would be able to stick, but generally soles that were unique to the row, fairly hard wearing rubber. They wouldn't be shoes for life. Depending on how often you wear them, you can wear them. Once the rubber's worn down, you can't replace them. You can't remove the sole and get a new sole or a new rubber sole attached. That's just not possible. Unless, of course, you can return them to the row. But I doubt the row repairs shoes. I'm more inclined to think they would send you to a shoe repairer, like Classic Shoes, for example. And then jumping up to the third category, the shoes that can be repaired. And these are the shoes that would typically have a sole. The lady shoes, they have a sole. The loafers, for example, the boots, those can be replaced once they've worn through. Fairly hard wearing soles. You can add the grip, for example. You can do a number of things to prolong the life of the sole, and you can change it. But what I question is the quality of the leather and whether it's leather that you'd be able to wear for many, many years to come. Shoes you can wear day in, day out, like men do, for example. I didn't get the impression you could do that with the leather, but I do remember seeing a pair of mules. I particularly liked them. I thought they looked fantastic. If I was pushed to buy a pair of shoes, this is the pair I'd buy. I liked the aesthetic, I liked the comfort, I liked the fit. I liked the fact that they had really solid soles. I could replace the heel and the sole as well. I thought they were fantastic shoes. And what I noticed with the men's shoes, as I mentioned earlier, men's shoes are better made than women's shoes. And the men's shoes that could be repaired, I noticed they had quite a few of the smarter shoes that were Goodyear welted. With shoes, bottom is the glued, and you have glued shoes which can be repaired. You can repair the sole, or you can have glued shoes. Once you've worn through the sole, you cannot repair them. And then you jump up to shoes that are Goodyear welted. And Goodyear welted is shoes that are machine stitched, and they machine stitch together the upper sole, which is what covers the top of your foot, and then the outer sole, which is the bottom, which is what touches the ground. Those are sewn around on the outer perimeter, and it's a more durable construction, better wearing than the glued shoes. And then above that, and this tends to be more of the custom-made shoes, the bespoke pair of shoes, they are hand welted, where every component is hand stitched, and the shoes are a lot more durable, a lot more flexible, a lot more comfortable than Goodyear welted, and they're a lot more robust. But with the men's, Goodyear welted, a better level of construction, and the shoes will last a longer time than the glued shoes. But generally speaking, the delicate shoes were just a no-go. They looked cheap, they were flimsy, no comfort, durability, flexibility to the shoes at all, really thin soles. Once they're worn through very quickly, they're done. Then the next category of shoes that can be repaired with either the grip can be added, or you can change the heel, for example, slightly harder wearing leather. And then the slightly higher category, for example, women's shoes with the loafers that you can wear for a few years, especially if you wear them day in, day out. You'd get quite a bit of wear from them, slightly more durable leather. You can replace the sole, the whole sole actually. And then you just maintain the shoes and you keep using them. But generally, I would be less inclined to invest in the Row because you have the benchmark, for example, Manolo, Blahnik. When it comes to the quality of the leathers they use, superior, the craftsmanship, the details, executed to an incredibly higher standard than the Row. And at a slightly lower price point, their shoes ranged from anywhere from 100 through to about £300-400 cheaper than the Row, but a far superior product. And so when you have Manolo, Blahnik, and then the Row, which is just a pure communication accessory, it just puts everything into perspective. And I have a number of Manolo, Blahnik, and Roger Vivier. Those are my main shoes. And the Row, I'd only consider the one pair, but that's if I was pushed. It's not something I would willingly pay for. But the longevity, the build quality, the leathers of the Row shoes, whether they're male or female, doesn't have the staying power to warrant the cost. But as I always say, when it comes to luxury, it's not about the cost, it's about the value. What are you getting? And it's very much a communication accessory, and you're buying the Row for the look and what it says and communicates to others. I like the timeless aesthetic of the Rose bags. Their designs are simple, they're non-fussy, they're easy to carry. The bags look expensive, they look the part. I like the neutral color palette. I also like the fact that they're generally lightweight bags. Even the bigger bags, they're relatively lightweight. I also like the fact that they use quite a bit of lambskin lining on the inside of a good chunk of their bags. Quite a number of the ones I looked at, I liked the lambskin lining on the inside. Deliciously soft. I also like some of the leathers they use. The Hector tote bag, one of my favorite bags. I like the fact that it's a tote bag with a zip. I like the grained bison leather on the outside. It's bull leather. Inside is lined using Pacari, and Pacari it's a pig-like animal that originates from South America. And the leather is rare, it's soft, and it's durable. And so they've combined the bison with the Pacari on the inside. It's an ultimate product. And I like it, and the components of it I don't like. I also like the Iowa duffel bag. If I was to choose a handbag, I'd opt for the Agnes bag. I like the leathers, the calfskin leather they've used for those bags. It's vegetal tanned and it's going to patina absolutely exquisitely. And the leather is soft. What I struggle with when it comes to the Row is that although their designs are timeless, they're simple, non-fussy, the construction is fairly basic. There's nothing overly considered or elaborate when it comes to the construction of their bags. And their bags are generally not made to stand the test of time. They're not the type of bags you buy to use everyday, heavy-duty, practical bags. So for example, the Hector tote bag, I like the leathers. But when you look at the handles, for example, they're thin. It is bison, which is a sumptuous, robust leather. But where you're going to get wear and tear coming through is the handles. And the tote is a bag that's meant to be used every day. It can take quite a bit of load. But the straps are not going to be comfortable, especially if the tote is heavy. And as I said, the wear and tear will start coming through. But what I generally noticed with their bags is that the handles are not robustly made. The leather might be exquisite, but the handles are not robustly made. They are not going to stand the test of time, particularly if you use the bags all the time. Their bags are occasion bags, and you don't weigh the bags down with a lot of weight. The handles don't have any support. They don't have leather inside, or if they do have something, it's man-made. And it's something that with time, if you're using the bag a lot, it may be something that might tear. It may be something that will soften with time, but it's not a material that will stand the test of time and remain firm and robust and give durability to the straps. That's something I noticed. And some of the straps are just painfully thin. It's just leather and it's stitched down, and it's a bag that's very much an occasion bag. You're going out, you just want something to pop in the bits for the evening, and not a bag you're going to carry all the time. So that's something I consistently noticed, that the construction is fairly simple, it's basic, it's not considered, they haven't really taken excessive usage and therefore wear and tear and how the bag should age in a measured manner based on how it's made. No, it's very simple, it's very basic, it's all about the look with the rose bags. And then I also looked at, for example, there's a new bag that's come in alongside the Margot. It's the Manolo, comes in different sizes, starts from about £3,500 going up to £5,000, £6,000, £7,000 depending on the size. Similar to the Margot in that they have a stamped grain calfskin leather on the outside, and then the inside is lined using fabric. A bag that's meant to be sold in larger quantities than the other styles. It's meant to be a style that's coming in alongside the Margot. It's going to be popular. They're going to sell more of it. So they've really gone for a bag where they can squeeze the margins. It's leather and then fabric on the inside, so it's not going to be costly. There's very little hardware when it comes to the rose bags, so their costs are considerably low. And then the cost of the Manolo, £3,500, £5,000, £6,000, £7,000, very much like the Margot. And then it has the cotton lining on the inside. It's really cheap. It's very basic. I guess it's an everyday bag. So the brands typically will say, we place cotton fabric on the inside to lighten the bag. But with the Ro, they're using lambskin that's still light and it doesn't add weight to the bags. They're basically just trying to be as cheap as possible and get as much from the bag as they like. And as I always say with luxury, it's not about the cost, it's about the value, and it's about aligning yourself with a product that's in demand, that has the appeal, that has the hype, and you will buy. There isn't any logic in terms of beautiful leather and then cotton fabric on the inside, and it costs a whopping £5,000, £6,000, £7,000. And so the bags, just like their shoes, they're to be used sparingly. The leather, some of the leathers are absolutely beautiful, they're exquisite, some of the designs really stand out. But the key indicators, the bags, for example, the straps, very basic construction means with time, the bag will start to show wear and tear, and therefore it's a bag that is to be used sparingly. As always, any thoughts, any questions, let me know in the comment section down below.